Welcome to the FCS Edge, where this episode we turn Sweet 16. And it's not just the playoff round we're in, but it's the 16th episode of the season. I'm Craig Haley of Stats Reform and theanalyst.com. My co-host is Zach McKinnell of FCS Football Central on SI. And there's a rumor spreading around that this is actually Zach's 1600th overall podcast appearance of the season. Can you confirm that number, Zach?
I don't know. It still feels a little light, Craig. My sleep schedule still hasn't caught up. But, man, I enjoy it. Listen, best time of the year. We have a bunch to talk about, man. I'm ready to get into it.
That we do. Well, last week we took a week off from the FCS Edge, and obviously we were busy the whole time with playoff action and the Bayou Classic. Fortunately, Graham Bell, our producer, did not abandon us. He's here today to produce the FCS Edge. Let's get right to it. First round, 5 home teams win, 3 road teams, which is a good number. In fact, that's the most ever in the first round or any round in the 24-team era of the playoffs. This is the 12th time for 24 teams. What stands out to the first round to you, Zach?
I mean, I think a lot of these games actually lived up to the hype. I know that some of the final scores may be a little bit misleading, but like even the Illinois State Southeastern Louisiana game, that was a defensive battle for all 4 quarters till Illinois State put that one away late. And then even the game North Dakota, Tennessee Tech, I saw a lot of people calling that game a blowout and a rout. That game was 10-6 going into the fourth quarter, and both defenses were excellent. It's just, listen, when you turn the ball over 6 times in the playoffs, that's going to get you beat a majority of the time. And then I think we had arguably one of the greatest games I can remember for a first round in terms of the Yale comeback. What a performance from the Bulldogs there. I mean, I don't know about you, Craig, because we had all the games on at once. There was a time where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and flip this game over to the UND Tennessee Tech game. Like, just I was like, it's over. It's 42-14. And then all of a sudden they score again. They forced a quick fumble. I thought overall, man, the first round really delivered. I think we had some blowouts, but I tell people all the time, you're going to get those. You got the blowouts in the 4-team FBS playoffs. When you have 24 teams, some people are going to get blown out, and it's all about matchups. But, man, I'll look ahead to this second round, Craig, and all the games are projected to be tight games, except for maybe one.
Yeah, I think you nail it here. I mean, the first round, we always see blowouts. We've seen that forever in the FCS playoffs, and I think this second round, will rescue it because these are tight games. I mean, 6 of them are less than a touchdown in the point spread. Even Illinois State going to North Dakota State, that's a familiar matchup. It's tough to win, but at the same time, they're not going to be intimidated by the Bison. Yale coming off this win that you mentioned, 43-42, going to Montana State's going to be perhaps rough. But I think Yale, that was the highlight of the first round to make that kind of comeback. In a way, it kind of rescued the Ivy League because, at the same time, Harvard's getting blown out by Villanova. But what a game. I mean, to score 29 unanswered points to win it. And Josh Pitzenberger, be able to run the ball when you're behind the way, 21 carries in the second half and he had a career high 209 yards. That was phenomenal in itself, that they fought their way back playing their style and not just going right to the pass. Unbelievable game, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. It was kind of like the perfect example of running you could still run the football even though you're down. They still had to make some key throws with Reno, but there's like this misconception that when you're down big, you can't run the football. Yale knows what their identity is. And I think it's almost kind of perfect, Craig, because he was the team captain, senior leader of this team. Like it was his moment to really step up in a huge game, like we were talking about. Then on the flip side, Abu Kamara at safety, a little bit of a rough first half, made some huge plays down the stretch. And I've said it on every show I've been on this week. Tony Reno doesn't get enough credit for how good of a head coach he is. He proved it this past weekend.
Yeah. Kamara, I actually had 4th or 5th on my Buchanan Award ballot. We're going to talk about our ballots in a little bit. Phenomenal year. And I think another storyline in the first round, the Southland Conference, to lose, Southeastern Louisiana, you mentioned them against Illinois State, that losing at home, and then also Lamar falling down 24-0 at Abilene, not really competing too much. That puts a lot of pressure on Stephen F. Austin this week. They're seeded, they had a bye. You know, the Southland really needs to get a win here, and that's a toss-up kind of game with Abilene. Uh, you know, I think South Dakota State, that was another storyline in the first round. I mean, to win 41-3 over New Hampshire, sure, we thought the Jackrabbits were going to win, but that's just a phenomenal performance getting Chase Mason back.
Yeah, I talked, last week about it because obviously we skipped our show, but I even wrote about it in my preview. I just thought that was a terrible stylistic matchup for New Hampshire. And if you built a team to get South Dakota State their confidence back, it would be a team like New Hampshire. And I think you saw that like South Dakota State has had the defense for multiple weeks now, Craig. They just needed some offense. And I thought Chase Mason looked very sharp. The weather, was exactly how the South Dakota State fans would want it in a first round game. But then also too, Craig, that the past 2-3 weeks they've run the ball really well. And I think this team could be terrifying if they continue to find ways to run the football and they continue to find ways to produce on the ground to help out whoever plays at quarterback.
Yeah, uh, that is true. I mean, I think South Dakota State has really turned it around the last two games, and we actually feel confident in them, fan wise, as no matter who's playing now. They just seem like they have a different edge. They've shown they can now win with two different quarterbacks and against good quality opponents. We had Rhode Island beating Central Connecticut State in a rematch of last year's first round. That was 27-19. They just sort of built a big lead and held on. South Dakota at Drake, 38-17. 21-point win in the regular season in that matchup, 21-point win here. It's almost like I know the committee can do a rematch in the first round when they're not from the same conference, but this kind of scenario where they win 21 points and just we don't need that anymore going forward, hopefully.
No, but I mean, you're going to get you're gonna get that matchup just because of the whole listen, I mean, I get the auto bids, but whoever outside of the rarity, like where you get a San Diego team that knocks off someone, I mean, those games probably aren't gonna be super competitive. So I think what happened is you look at this first round and there were so many Missouri Valley teams, there were a handful of the Southland teams, so C8, like you couldn't like there were so many matchups that had to be avoided that I think they had to go with that rematch or the travel costs would have been insane, right? And they try to keep some sort of regionality to these matchups to a point. And so I do think that South Dakota Drake game really did help shape how that first round looked in terms of limiting the amount of cross country flights you may have.
Yeah, and the committee, I was saying how good of a 2020 decade they've had here with the selections and the pairings last year particularly because that home teams just kept winning. That just showed you they seeded them right. Now you and I weren't too enamored with their pairings, their seedings this year. What they did to Tennessee Tech, yeah, Tennessee Tech lost poorly in the first round, but to drop them from where they were in the November public reveals to the 13th seed, it just didn't always compute to us. Where do you think they stand right now after a round as far as their pairings and just everything that we saw, on Selection Sunday?
Yeah, I don't think the results of this past weekend really changed how I felt about the seedings. I've saw a lot of Missouri Valley fans, and I get it, say this is why Tennessee Tech didn't deserve a seed, and why maybe you even put a South Dakota State over them. And I still disagree. Like at the end of the day, you're using information that the committee nor anyone else in the FCS community had to inform decisions of the past. Like you can't use future results. And then I saw people using like spreads, hypothetical spreads, and said we should use those to see teams, which is ridiculous. Like at the end of the day, strength, and I've said this and I've tried to clarify my point multiple times, strength of schedule should be one of the metrics we use, and it should be important, but it should not be the sole metric that we use. Like other things have to matter as well as strength of schedule, and you have to use it all in conjunction. To say that Tennessee Tech at 10-0 didn't, or 10-0 against the FCS at least, didn't deserve to be seated that high is ridiculous in my opinion. And if you watch the game, the defense was just as good, if not better, than North Dakota's defense. The problem was they had 6 turnovers, and it just spiraled out of control at the end. They were competitive for 3.5 quarters. You look at Southeastern Louisiana, could you make an argument that they didn't deserve a 16 seed? I think you could. In my projections, I didn't have them seeded, so I agree with you, but to argue that they didn't belong in the playoffs would be a stretch, and I think me and you both agree a 9-1 against the FCS team with 2 FBS losses should be in the playoffs. I think with Harvard, Craig, maybe you could make an argument for Monmouth to be in over Harvard, but Derek Robertson wasn't available. We take into account injuries. Was Monmouth with Frankie Weaver better than Harvard? I don't know. And if we have that Villanova Monmouth rematch, what's to say that Villanova doesn't beat them the same way without Derek Robertson, who was a massive factor in the first game? If we want to use hypotheticals, we can keep going down the line. I do think if you do look at the bubble, there was a strong argument. Like for me, I didn't think New Hampshire belonged in. And I mean, they didn't perform very well, but they also got one of the toughest matchups in the first round where you had to go to Brookings in the snow. And then, God forbid, Chase Mason, who was on track to be an All American, comes back and plays arguably his best game of the season. So there's so many external factors I think people are overlooking. I still would have considered an Austin P or a Southern Utah over New Hampshire. But at the end of the day, the committee said New Hampshire had the better wins, and New Hampshire did have the head-to-head win over Monmouth, which could have played a massive role in who got that last spot in the field. But I still don't think anyone has a strong, valid argument, Craig, that Tennessee Tech didn't belong as a seed. I still think, and even if let's just say we go into the second round, Craig, and let's just say South Dakota beats Mercer, right? And it's a 14-point game, but it's competitive for 3 quarters. That doesn't mean Mercer didn't belong in the top 8. We only can judge the information that we had at that time. And so we'll see. But I still think the with how competitive Tennessee Tech was for a handful of quarters, Southeastern Louisiana was competitive for a while. I still think that those teams still belong where they were.
Yeah, you're never going to make everybody happy, of course. And I would even argue that North Dakota should have been the one left out of the field, despite what they did here, winning 31-6 at Tennessee Tech. 5 of their 7 wins were against last place teams or teams that tied for last place. They beat Youngstown State and Southern Illinois, but their best teams on their schedule they still lost to. But again, you can make a case very different ways, and you're not going to keep everybody happy. I think moving forward, I don't think they should be talking about the lineups. I was shocked that Mark Wharton admitted they discussed Derek Robertson and Monmouth availability. They don't know that answer. I mean, for one, he was trying to work his way back, but on Selection Sunday, they didn't know if he was going to play the following Saturday night and Saturday afternoon. And I just think that's a dangerous precedent to be going into that factor, whether you're if that's a plus or a minus for a team. But I think the 5-3 record of the road teams is 3-5. They won 3 times, and that's phenomenal. I mean, last year only 3 wins out of 22 through the semifinals. 19-3 the home teams went. So with these toss-ups this week, we might see things a little crazy moving forward, where 3, 4, 5 teams went on the road this week. Who knows? But there's certainly that possibility because you can make a case in many regards. I think it's a fascinating second round because of the tightness of the matchups. Hopefully it turns out that way. There's a big gap between those final afternoon games and UC Davis kicking off 10 p.m. Eastern against Rhode Island. So there'll be a lot of assessing in between, and we'll see where that goes. All right, so we've had we have a lot to look forward to. Let's also in this episode, let's talk about the FCS National Awards. Obviously, the finalists have been announced. They've been announced. We've winners are starting to come out, and invites to the National Awards Banquet, which is January 3rd in Nashville, 2 nights before the national championship games. Just the 4 long-standing namesake awards: Eddie Robinson, Jerry Rice, Buck Buchanan, Walter Payton. I just want to pick your brain, see who you went with on your ballot. I know you're announcing them in stories, but let's start with the National Coach of the Year, the Eddie Robinson Award. Who'd you go with, and why?
Yeah, I actually went with Travis Bush from UTRGV. I think what he did year one of a startup program was so impressive, and it's funny because there's a handful of us national voters that are real close, and we've kind of talked about our selections, and understand there were some people that didn't vote for him because he had the resources. Was the argument is that they poured so much money in that he had to be successful, but man, 9-3 for the first year of the program, and to finish what was he 500 in conference play is just so impressive year one, and that program to be competitive year one at the Division I level what was impressive, and it's very, very hard to get these startups off the ground, and I thought UTRGV did such a good job, and they have a bunch of guys that were freshmen that played really, really well. We're gonna get into the Jerry Rice Award, but they had multiple guys that were up for that award. I think when Freshman All-American comes out, that team could have 4, 5, 6 selections across all the different publications that do it. I was so impressed with how they got the most out of the young guys. You go and get a guy like Eddie Lee Marburger at quarterback, you win some key games, you competed well. I mean, I know they didn't live up to the hype, but man, they beat Incarnate Word, who was like a preseason top 5 team and did it convincingly. So, man, give these guys some credit, and some of their losses were to playoff teams, like, losing to, what was it, Southeastern Louisiana early in the year, and they had some competitive games. But also too, they beat Prairie View, who was in the SWAC championship this weekend on the road in one of their first D1 wins. So, man, I think Travis Bush deserves all the credit. And then just some guys I also considered. I consider Bobby Wilder at Tennessee Tech. He was on my ballot. And then even just Deshaun Jackson from Delaware State, who had the biggest turnaround in the country, man. He took over a Delaware State program that hasn't won in years, Craig, and was one game away from getting to the Celebration Bowl. So those were the guys I considered on the high end of my ballot.
Yeah, it's funny. You and I did not talk about this award, and we, I've kind of we've gone back and forth on some of the others, but this one, are not talking about who we were going to pick, and all the ones you mentioned, I think they were all on my ballot. Kevin Cahill was also on my ballot, but my number, the winner that I picked, it did not age well, and I'll preface it by saying I picked North Dakota to win at Tennessee Tech last week. But I also picked Bobby Wilder for the Eddie Robinson Award. He was number one on my ballot. And you're mentioning, what Travis Bush, and he was on my ballot. We do a top 5. Off the field matters too. And I think Coach Wilder building this program in 2 years, they tied for the title last year in the OVC Big South. They win it outright this year. And football's a driving force. And now suddenly Tennessee Tech is moving to the Southern Conference next year. So I think, he's done a lot for that program. It's not just on the field, it's off the field too. So you can't go wrong with any of these coaches that we're mentioning, for national awards. All right, Jerry Rice Award, 15th anniversary season. This one's not too hard. I think we're both going to have the same pick, and I'll reveal it. I'm going to go with Braden Atkinson, Mercer quarterback, just turned around their season. Leads all freshmen in passing yards, passing touchdowns. Is that your pick?
Yeah, and if it's not unanimous, we have like, who else are you voting for
True.
at number 1? It should be he should get every single first place vote. It should be no debate. He's been the best freshman quarterback in the country, and Craig, there's an argument that he could be a candidate for the Walter Payton this year, is how good he's been. And when you look at how far this offense has come since he's taken it over, it's so impressive. And listen, I think Caden Pinnick is going to be everyone's number 2, as he probably should be. I thought Caden had a great year, but something has to be said about going undefeated against the FCS as a starter, winning a conference championship, and getting your team in that top 8 conversation. Because Craig, they lost to Presbyterian, and everybody said they aren't even going to make the playoffs. There's no way. They just lost to Presbyterian. They put him in, run the rest of the table, get a top 8 seed. So impressive. And I think he has a real chance to further solidify himself as a top quarterback in the country this weekend when they go up against South Dakota.
Yeah, phenomenal year. I always worry that these young standouts, we're going to see them in the transfer portal because the FBS is looking for players like this. He was just phenomenal all year. All right, Buck Buchanan Award, FCS Defensive Player Year. always a little wide open. Tell us who you went with.
Yeah, this one was still easy for me. I understand. I know that Stone King from Furman had the stats, and if you just base it off stats, he's probably going to win it. But for me, I trust my eyes. I trust my film evals. I watch a lot of games. Andrew Zock is the unquestioned best player in the country, in my opinion, defensively, and that's who I went with. I thought he was outstanding, and I think it says a lot that even the conference voters and the coaches voted him over Stone King as the SoCon Defensive Player of the Year, and it even further solidified that 20 tackles for loss, 11 and a half sacks. And I think what gave him the edge, because I also consider Lando Brown from Southern Utah, all those 3 edge rushers, it was Zock's ability to flash on film on a really good defense gave him the edge, and the fact that he was so impactful for a championship team, to me, that matters. I don't think wins are just a quarterback stat. I'm gonna lean the players who played big time football, who led their team to championships over guys who didn't win on the field. And then I think an underrated one, I think, Dowler and Caleb Proctor were the other 2 guys that I had on my ballot. I thought Caleb I've really thought Caleb Proctor was gonna be overlooked. I was glad to see where he came in the voting, because a lot of the times my frustration with voters and media outlets and all conference awards is we don't separate defensive tackles and defensive ends. You'll see these all conference teams with 8 edge rushers and no defensive tackles, and it doesn't make any sense because those are 2 fundamentally different positions. I was really, really glad to see Caleb Proctor got his respect, because I thought he was the best defensive tackle, maybe not even just in the FCS, but one of the best in college football.
Yeah, I had 4 of the 5 same on my ballot as you. I did have James Conway on there. I didn't have Lando Brown in my top 5, but I went also Andrew Zock for my number 1 pick on my ballot. And we're just each one of 56 voters, so we're sharing our ballots, but at the same time, you know we're a little under 2% of the actual ballots. So all right, Walter Payton Award, FCS Offensive Player of the Year, the Heisman of the FCS, 39th year, just like the Eddie Robinson Award. Uh, Great candidates. Who'd you go with?
Yeah, I went with, Bo Brungard. Now I saw it was funny. I mean, I was getting so many tags on Saturday, like, "Is the voting over? Is the voting over?" And Craig, I think we might have had a different winner if voting was open past the first round of the playoffs because of the collapse. Even though people kind of overlooked he had 400 yards of total offense and 6 touchdowns this past weekend, so he lived up to the hype, I think. But I had him. It came down to him and Cole Payton. Those were the top 2. Teron Dickens was 3 for me, and I'm gonna say this, I was a little bit torn, Craig. I mean, I think the difference between him and Cole Payton was much closer than people thought. For me, the way I do my voting is I go through it all the first day you send it, and then I fill out my ballots every single day up until voting ends on Saturday. I make a new ballot every day, and I reevaluate, start fresh, and I just consistently look at these prospects. I watch some film, and I think even with the stat differential, there's still a really good argument that Cole Payton deserves this award. And this was, as me as a voter, one of the toughest years that I've had to decide, just because you had the clutch ability of Cole Payton that doesn't show up in the box score. But then on the flip side, is it the best player or is it the most valuable player? Because that's really the difference here. Because if you take Cole Payton off of North Dakota State, Craig, they're probably still 12-0, 11-1 maybe, and they're the number 1 overall seed in the field. If you took Bro Bungard away from Youngstown State, they might be 4-8. Like, that's the difference here, and so that's why I gave the slight edge to Brungard here, and I had Cole Payton and Teron Dickens as my 2 and 3.
Yeah, I went with Brungard myself over Peyton. Dickens right there with led the FCS in touchdown passes and passing yards per game in only 9 games. It's real close. I mean, you can make a case either way. You mentioned the different factors. That's the thing. I mean, 56 different voters can look at it 56 different ways. So even though these are our selections, it doesn't mean that's the overall body agreeing with us. So what we're going to find out. I mean, obviously the FCS National Awards show is January 3rd in Nashville. Again, these are just great candidates, and it's fun to debate it, and it's fun to just really be mesmerized by the talents of these different athletes, student athletes. So, all right, one more thing here. Hopefully a lot of our viewers and listeners have been with us from day one. And way back when, in the first two episodes, I said back in August, I said, I'm going to take stock of something that we did, and I went back in the last week and took a look. In the preseason, we did our picks for the Optus Super computer. It gave an over under on win totals. It gave a whole bunch of teams, and we just picked two that we thought could be more than one win better than the over under. Maybe not quite two, but almost. And here's what I came up with. You went with Sac State. They were 6.2. Southern Illinois 5.8. You went to over on those two. I went the over on Lehigh 8.3 and Rhode Island 7.5. I'd say in this particular thing, probably mine were a little stronger. Rhody and Lehigh 12-0, Rhody 10-2 in the regular season. Let's see, Sac State was 8-4. Now that counts for you. I mean, that's 1.8 better. That's all we were looking for. Southern Illinois, they went 7-5. You were 5. The over under was 5.8. That's close. But it was just fun that those were our picks. I mean, the advanced data is crazy how close it can be though on over unders. What are your thoughts looking back?
Yeah, I feel good about my picks. I think with Sac State, it took them a little bit of time to kind of figure out their identity, and I mean that makes sense, right? They brought in a million transfers, and it takes a lot of time for those guys to gel. I thought they were playing pretty good football toward the end of the year, and for Southern Illinois, man, I think the offense was everything we thought it was going to be with DJ Williams and Vincent out there at wide receiver, but and defensively, I mean, they had the individual talent. Jeremiah McClendon was great, probably going to be an All American, but the overall defensive unit really held this team back, and they allowed too many points. And you look at how close it was. They're probably in the playoffs if they win that 5 overtime game against South Dakota a few weeks ago. And it was just one or two games that really separated them from reaching their ultimate goal. But I feel good about my picks. I'm glad the over hit on both of those.
Yes. All right. Conference title differences. 13 conferences. We had 10 in the same picks. We had three differences. So I think you got me. Well, you did get me on this one. Here we go. NEC football. You went with Central Connecticut State. I went with Duquesne. Central Connecticut State did it. What do you think of the Blue Devils?
Shout out to the Blue Devils, man. I think I went back and actually watched that episode when I saw like the what we were going to be talking about, and I mentioned Howard and this rushing attack, and I mean he won the NEC Offensive Player of the Year again. They had another their linebacker unit got revamped. What was it? Stoll, I think, won the Defensive Player of the Year, and they had so. I think CCSU did a great job in that. Listen, they keep winning, and I know that in the playoffs, when you look the past 2 years, they've really pushed Rhode Island 2 straight years. This team's a really, really good NEC team, and I'll be curious to see if Elijah Howard gets a shot at the next level because I could see him being one of those guys that is a UDFA type guy, makes a roster, and then he gets a big touchdown run in Thanksgiving here like 4 or 5 years, Craig, and everyone's like, where did he go to college? Central Connecticut State? Like that's the type of player I see. So I'm glad the Blue Devils man made me look like I know a little bit of SCS football.
Yeah, Elijah Howard, he was 990 rushing yards 2 years ago, was over 900 last year. It was cool to see him get over 1,000 this year, and he did it in the regular season. So, SoCon, I had you beat there. I had Mercer, and you had ETSU. Uh, what you think of this race?
Yeah, Mercer proved me. I mean, I still thought Mercer was going to be good. I just worried a little bit offensively, and I guess I wasn't technically wrong because DJ Smith didn't play super well. But Greg, I didn't I couldn't predict Brandon Atkinson was going to be this good. If I would have saw that, I might have flipped my pick. And also my ETSU pick, like they finished 7-5, I believe. And you look back at this season, Craig, they had a 2-score lead over Chattanooga, a 2-score lead over West Georgia, that they were competitive against Mercer. I had a lead in, I think, the 4th quarter in that one. man, what a bunch of what ifs there for Healy and ETSU. So I still think ETSU was better than maybe their record suggests. And if they just learn how to win some of these close games, I think they're going to be a real big factor in the SoCon race this year. I think I might just have been 1 year too early.
Well, in the Pioneer League, this decides it, and you had it right. You went with Drake. I went with San Diego. San Diego, the 2010s was their decade. The 2020, it belongs to Drake. I know you like the Bulldogs and what they accomplished.
Joe Woodley, I was never going to pick against my man. Listen, I've been high on him since they hired him, and listen, he might have lost his first conference game this year, but he continued his conference championship streak. Won a conference championship every single year he's been a head coach now. So I'm rocking with Joe Woodley till I'm proven wrong.
Very good pick. Well, it's kind of fun here. I mean, we have all these playoff games, but to be able to talk about our national awards ballots, our preseason picks, it just there's so much always to talk about with FCS. But after the break, we're going to get right back to the playoffs. Even our SWAC championship game pick, it's going to be our pick'em segment, and this is the FCS Edge. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to the FCS Edge. Our second and final segment this week is our Pick'em segment. We have 9 terrific games this week. The second round, 8 FCS playoff games. Also the SWAC championship game. Let's just go sort of in order of the kickoff times for the FCS playoffs and tell we'll give our picks and we'll tell us what we like about the matchups and the winning team. Let's start right with Villanova. The 12 seed is at the 5 seed Lehigh. Terrific, close matchup. They're 50 miles apart in Pennsylvania. Who do you like here, Zach?
Yeah, I like Lehigh here. I don't know if Villanova has the front seven to stop what Lehigh wants to do, which is run the football. And I think Hayden Johnson matches up really, really well with McQuaid on the other side. The other thing too is I just don't know if Villanova's defense can force enough mistakes for Lehigh. They don't force a ton of turnovers. They don't get that pressure. And like in terms of pressure rate, I think Lehigh's offensive line has been elite. I don't think Lehigh's going to make enough mistakes to keep Villanova in this game. And I think people are sleeping on Lehigh a little bit, Craig. I've seen a lot of people say Lehigh doesn't belong. They haven't played anybody. I think Lehigh shows everyone they belong this weekend. I like Lehigh here.
Yeah, and people are wrong if they're saying that about Lehigh because 4 of the 5 non-conference teams had winning seasons, and the league certainly got stronger with Richmond. And Richmond was a stronger team when they met in the season opener against Lehigh. Kevin Cahill 12-0. I mean, that's just phenomenal. I'm going to go with Villanova. They have the fewest turnovers in the nation in the FCS, 5. Pat McQuaid's been off the chart with his efficiency. Though they're the only team that has 3 players with over 600 rushing yards in the FCS. Avit, Mace, Ragland, who had the big game last week against Harvard. I'm gonna go with Villanova, just being able to solve that Lehigh defense maybe in a tight game, but it's just a great matchup all around. All right, another close one. South Dakota 9-4, the 11 seed going down to the 6 seed Mercer, which is 9-2 out of the SoCon. Nice to see the SoCon hosting a Missouri Valley team and not just going up to the Dakotas. I'm going to go with Mercer in this one. I think Aiden Bauman, his experience is off the charts for South Dakota, but Braden Atkinson's the hot hand. I just think they can get it done at home. Obviously, we like what Andrew Zock does, and it's not just him. They lead the FCS in sacks as a team with 42. Who do you like here?
Yeah, I like Mercer here. I saw there was some Missouri Valley media members saying this was going to be a blowout and this was the easiest game to predict. And I just don't think they've watched any Mercer football because I think when you look at the matchup on paper, Craig, I don't know if this is a great one for South Dakota. They don't force a ton of pressure. They don't create a ton of negative plays, and Mercer's offensive line has been the most improved unit on this team. And then on the flip side, the question is going to be South Dakota ranked second to last, Craig, among all 24 playoff teams in pressure allowed You just talked about Mercer specializes in getting after the quarterback. Are they going to be able to protect Aiden Bauman? Because the weakness of Mercer's team is the secondary. Can they throw the football? Because they're a run first team. And I don't think that's how you beat Mercer because they have a really good front seven. So I'm going to go with Mercer here at home. But I still think watch out for Lorenzo Finner. He's becoming a superstar. And against a Mercer secondary that's allowed some over the top plays, he can get behind the defense and make some stuff happen.
Yeah, there's a reason the second round the home teams keep going like 8-0 like last year or 7-1, really put up, a great home field advantage. It's because, that week of rest is huge. Not playing Thanksgiving weekend. But generally, this second round winner comes in with, 5, 6 straight weeks of playing a game. Not South Dakota. I mean, obviously they played in the first round, but they had a bye in that last week of the second round. So they're a little bit rested too, as opposed to some of the other second round road teams here. So that factors in as well. But certainly teams like to have that bye and to rest over Thanksgiving. Even get guys back that hadn't been playing, like a Chase Mason at South Dakota State. So all right, another one. North Dakota State, the top seed, of course, defending national champion, 12-0, hosting Illinois State, 9-4. 14 straight wins in the series for the Bison, including early October. They won 33-16. I think I know who you like, but tell us who you do.
Yeah, there's a helmet behind me that might be spoiling my pick. Give me the Bison. And I don't even think this one's going to be as competitive as the first matchup was, Craig. If you remember, it was a tight game for three quarters. I think it was like 18-16 going into the fourth. The Bison pulled away in the fourth quarter. It took them a while schematically to kind of figure out Illinois State. But once they did, it was off to the races. I think they bring in that same level of focus. They've had a bye week, and there's not a better big game coach than Tim Polasek. I think he's going to have them dialed in off a bye week. I like the Bison here, and I like them big.
Yeah, Polasek is really just he's just so focused and unbelievable what he's done to get them back to the very, very top level of all of college football. I'm going to disagree that I think Illinois State makes this a competitive game. I do like the Bison. It'd be tough not to pick them. They're 38-1 at home in their playoff FCS playoff history, but I just think they're so familiar, with the Bison. They're going to have to slow down, Barika Penu, not let the Bison just dictate, the time possession running the ball. Cole Payton's going to be able to do that, but I just think they're ready for this. They're healthier. I like the Bison. I just think the Redbirds, if there's one negative here, and last year, or I remember early in the season, I talked about, they got blown out in all their losses. Well, in all their losses this year, they're getting blown out in the fourth quarter. 67-7, they've been outscored in the fourth quarter of their losses, and that includes 15-0 against the Bison. They have to do better in the fourth quarter to actually pull an upset, but I think they make it competitive. All right, the other North Dakota team, North Dakota, going to Tarleton State. North Dakota's it's a first-time matchup. They're 8-5. Big win on the road last week, and the 4 seed Tarleton, 11-1. Rested team. Who do you like here?
Yeah, I slept on North Dakota last week, and I'm still sleeping this week, I guess you could say. I'm going to go with Tarleton here. But I will say this, the one thing that concerns me is I do think North Dakota is going to be able to run the football maybe a little bit more efficiently than last week. The question, though, is it sounds like Kaminsky should be okay by Saturday, but he's in concussion protocol. If he's not able to go, do you trust him winning this game on the road with Ronfo, who was a starter last year? But let's be honest, he wasn't as good as Kaminsky's been all year. And the other problem is Kaminsky, even though he's been good all year, Craig, has turned the football over a lot. That's one thing Tarleton State does in an elite level defensively is force turnovers. There was a little bit of a concern that if they turn the football over and give this Tarleton offense some room to get going, this thing could actually get out of hand for North Dakota if they start turning the football over. And then watch out for Tylen Hines at running back, man. Trey Page got a lot of the shine, but Hines was supposed to be the number one running back in week 0, gets hurt against Portland State. The past 2 weeks has been electric for Tarleton State. Watch him this weekend against a really, really good North Dakota defense.
Yeah, and Victor Gabos has been, really efficient coming back from injury himself. I agree. I mean, first of all, the health of Jerry Kaminsky is what we're all, want to see him improve. But either way, I think this is a tough assignment. Tarleton's just a strong team at home, especially, and just have so many weapons. So I agree with you. I'm going to go with Tarleton State. All right, we talked earlier. I think there's a lot of pressure on Stephen F. Austin to get it done at home after the other two Southland teams lost. They're the 7 seed, 10-2. Abilene Christian, they lost to in the regular season, 28-20. Abilene comes in as the 10 seed, 9-4, with just beating good teams all year. And it says a lot that they've won the UAC auto bid 2 straight years now over a Tarleton team that's always in the national uh, uh, championship conversation. At least this year they are. I'm going to go with Abilene Christian. If there's one game that I would flip flop on, it would be this one. I think Stephen F. Austin is a little motivated here. I just think Stephen F. Austin's defense. You know, it's probably not quite as strong as against like an Abilene who did score 28 points in the regular season. There's so many offensive weapons in this game. I'm just gonna go with Abilene though.
Yeah, so on paper, like you said, on paper, this one's a bit of a flip flop for me. If you could ask me, like, all leading up to us recording, I've been kind of going back and forth. I'm going to lean Abilene because of this. I think their ability to win big games is a little bit overlooked here. Every single time they get a ranked matchup, they get a top team, they just find another gear, Craig. It's like they'll cruise. Like if you look at all their stats, are all middle of the road. And it's because they're cruising against these bad teams and they play down to their competition. But when they get up against a good team, they're playing like way up here now. And I think Stone Earl's experience, I think this defense, I think they got the best linebacking core in the FCS potentially with Rayshawn Miles and those guys and also Will Schaefer. I think they make enough plays to win this game even on the road. And I think they find a way to get a handful of key stops. You look at the first game, a few key turnovers, a few key red zone stops. That's how Abilene Christian wins these games. And I think they find a way to get it done this weekend.
Yeah, this has been a great rivalry. It's turned into that. I think back to the COVID year where they played each other, and it just they've played tight games for a while now. It's a terrific rivalry. In fact, this may be the one that's tied 13-13. I think I'm not quite remembering for sure. All right, so let's go to Montana State, the number 2 seed. They're 10-2 at home, 10 wins in a row against the comeback team of the year, Yale, 9-2 off that 43-42 win at Youngstown State. This is the one where I think I can see Illinois State maybe making the game competitive against the Bison, maybe pulling an upset just because of the familiarity. I don't see an upset here. I think Montana State home with that running game is going to overpower Yale. So I'm going to go with the Bobcats at home.
Yeah, I think that the thing is Montana State's offense is just a better is they don't like Lampson is not the type of athlete Brungard is, but it's a better version of that offense where they're going to be explosive. They're going to have the downhill rushing attack, and Lampson is a probably a little bit more of an efficient passer right now than even what Brungard is. And I think that's going to give Yale's defense some problems, just like Youngstown's offense gave those some problems last week. And the other problem is, Craig, Montana State doesn't have Youngstown State's defense, and they're actually elite defensively. I think they're going to take the run away. I think they're going to get after Reno pressure wise, and that environment is way different, right, than playing in Youngstown. Going to Bozeman, stadium's going to be packed out. I like Montana State, and I like them. I like them pretty convincingly in this one as well.
All right, two more second round games, and this is the highlight game of the playoffs so far. Number 14 seed South Dakota State, 9-4, going to number 3 seed Montana, 11-1. They've met the last 2 years in the playoffs. Obviously, in the national championship game, 2023, it was 23-3 Jackrabbits. They won again last year, 35-18 in the second round. So I think the Grizz are really geared up here. Who are you picking?
Oh, you want to talk about a flip flop game? I've been I've been going back and forth because the hardest thing with picking South Dakota State games are we know they're not the team that beat Sac State and Montana State in week 1 and 2. They're not that team right now, but they also aren't the team that we saw lose to Indiana State anymore. Now with that Chase Masa's back, so Craig, it's your guess that of what South Dakota State team we're going to get this weekend because could Chase Mason play as well as he did last week? Probably, but Is it likely? I don't know. I mean, he played at such an elite level. And then on the flip side too, I looked throughout the year, Montana State's offense wasn't fully figured out in week 2. I think when you look at this year, this might be the most explosive offense that they faced all season. Not the best because I really like what North Dakota State has, but this might be the most explosive offense they've seen all season. Wortham, Gilman, Ayat's playing at a high level. The one thing I'm concerned about though, Craig, is as good as Montana's offense has been, there's just been random moments where it has just forgotten how to play football and they don't run the football well. Ayat turns it over. You look at that Caden Dowler pick in the brawl, that changed the entire trajectory of that game. Montana had a chance on that drive to really put that game away. And so, but at home off a bye week. I'm going to lean Montana in a close one. I trust their offense just a bit more. And they had a week to get healthy in the secondary, which is really, really important because they were missing some key guys in the back end. And I think that's going to play a big role. I like Montana in a close one.
This is the flip flop game of the week. I'm going to go with the Jackrabbits. I think the way you just described their season, that's why this is the FCS Edge, because you put it in a nutshell. They're not as strong as the beginning of the year, not as bad as their losing streak. I think they're getting right at the right time with Chase Mason back. Low Ridge, he's going to have a big game, take some pressure off Mason, who that Grizz defense is going to key on. But Ayat, Gilman, Wortham. I mean, the big three is tremendous. And what you mentioned about Montana, I think back to the North Dakota game. I mean, that second half, that rescue in the fourth quarter, especially with Ayat, that changed the way the whole season went. If they had lost that game, maybe we wouldn't think of them as strong as they are. But I'm going to go with the Jackrabbits on the road in a close one, kind of like a 27-23 kind of game. All right, last one of the night on Saturday is UC Davis, the 8th seed, hosting the ninth seed Rhode Island, 10 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2 on the big network, as opposed to the other games being on ESPN Plus. 3,000-mile trip, just a shade under, maybe 10 miles or so, door to door. Who do you like here? I'm going to go with UC Davis at home.
Yeah, this one was actually tighter than I thought it was going to be once I started breaking it down. I think Rhode Island's offense could present a ton of problems for UC Davis's defense, especially with them being banged up. But at home, it's a long trip. I think the difference here is I trust UC Davis's offense to establish the run a bit more because I think both quarterbacks will make plays. The other X factor is which quarterback is not going to make the mistake to lose the game. Caden Pennick's a young quarterback. He's been great, but he has been prone to make some mistakes. And we already know the type of gunslinger that Devin Farrell is, where sometimes it's really, really locked in. Other times it's not great. But I will say this, if you're a fan of wide receivers in this game, this is the one. I mean, with Samuel for UC Davis and then also Marquise Buchanan for Rhode Island, there's some outstanding talent there. Then also tight end spot as well for UC Davis is always elite. To some of the best tight ends in the country. And two creative, explosive offenses. This is a must-see game late night, like you said, like 10 o'clock Eastern time. You need to stay up for this one because fireworks.
Yeah, I tell you, one of the reasons I think it could stay close, you are right making this long trip, but UC Davis, all those, those key injuries we've talked about on defense, they don't get off the field all the time. I mean, they allow over 44% of third down conversions. That's big for a team like Rhode Island that just wants to control game clock and take the crowd out of it. So I do think this is a great matchup. 9 versus 8, it should be. I'll go, but I'm going to go with UC Davis, like I said. All right, one more game on Saturday, 2 p.m. Also on ESPN2, 2 p.m. Eastern. That is Prairie View 9-4 is at Jackson State 9-2. In the SWAC championship game. They haven't met since 2021, which was the SWAC championship game. I believe Jackson State won 27-10 that year. I think it's a fun matchup. I think it's a more competitive matchup than just saying, Jackson State's at home. Who do you like?
Ooh, man. Okay, so if you would have asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have said Jackson by a lot. But the more film I watched this week, I think the closer this matchup realistically is. I think PV's defense has a real good chance to keep this one close, and Cam Peters has been playing his best football. The problem, though, is Jacobian Morgan rumored to be back this weekend potentially. but also too, PV's one weakness is rushing defense, and if there's one thing you have to be able to do against Jackson State is stop the run. Ahmad Miller, Davenport, I mean, the list, Travis Terrell, and then they got the X factor on the outside in Nathan Rimbert, who's been an electric weapon. I think Jackson wins this one, Craig, but I think this is a very low possession, low scoring game, and I think Jackson finds a way to get it done. They're at home, and TC Taylor has consistently delivered in these big games since he's been the head coach at Jackson State.
That is true about what he's done as the head coach. Jacoby and Morgan, hopefully he's back. Hopefully he's healthy. You know, Jared Lockhart has done a terrific job as a freshman to fill in. Either way, like you mentioned, the running game, they've kind of come to rely on that towards the end of the regular season, which they did with Irv Mulligan last year. You know, Ahmad Miller's really taking it to the next level. So I think that's a factor. I tell you, the closer I looked at this, I did a flip flop. I'm going to go with Prairie View A&M with a road upset. You mentioned Peters, Bingham, Rockwell. They all finished strong in November in the regular season. I just think Tremaine Jackson has them peaking at the right time. That is one that I could be way off on, but that is one I'm going to give you. Prairie View and A&M winning the SWAC championship game. Great matchups all around. Tell us about Saturday. What are you looking forward to the match most?
Man, I'm pumped. Like you said, we got the SWAC championship, second round of the playoffs. We get to see some of these top seeded teams play. I think there's a bunch, and we mentioned the point spreads, a bunch of one score spreads across the FCS. I think that it's projecting to be one of the most competitive second rounds that we've seen in a while. And in the SWAC championship, we get to see who gets to go meet South Carolina State. I think it's probably the most projected to be the most competitive SWAC championship we've had in a while. It's been a bit of a mismatch recently in recent years with FAMU and PV a few years ago. Jackson is Southern, hasn't been super competitive either the past few years. So I'm really excited to see a SWAC championship that really might come down to the last quarter, last possession. And I think when you look at that vet's going to be packed out. That's going to be one of the best games of the weekend.
Those teams better not have been looking ahead and scouting South Carolina State, because you got to get through this one, and then it's a quick turnaround to the Celebration Bowl next weekend. So great matchup. I tell you what, you would always say, many of us would say, Jackrabbits, Grizz in the second round, sort of like Bison, Bobcats, a few years back in the second round. It's almost like disappointing that one of them gets knocked out, but it spices things up. I mean, I think this is you probably won't even have a better matchup in the quarterfinals than this one, and I'm not even looking ahead to see what they can be, but I just think that's way fascinating. What a game! Hopefully the weather factors in, and then we get that kind of gritty down to the wire game that we all want to see. Great matchups. I think they're all a lot of fun. It's great to see that 6 out of 8 are under a touchdown point spread. It just shows you the tightness of the round. Looking forward to it. Zach, thanks for all your comments this week, all your input. We thank Graham Bell. I mean, he gets us going every week as our producer. We thank you, our viewer and listener each week on the podcast. We'll be back next week, talk more, and get you ready for the quarterfinals. This is the FCS Edge.